SQL injection. It is one of the biggest and most serious vulnerabilities out there. SQL injection happens once a database query is taking an argument of an unfiltered user input. Usually, those inputs are something like usernames or passwords. It could also be something like an input on a page where you search for a specific product. Whatever it is, the backend process is the same. Our input is getting sent to the database of the website. The database checks whether our input is stored somewhere. Usually this is something like a password check. So the website would send a hash of our password that we inputted, it would send it to the database, and it would see whether it can find the match. If the match is found, and we inputted correct password, then the database confirms it to the server and we get to log in to our account. Now, this is just an example. It doesn't have to be passwords that we input. It can be any type of application as long as it communicates with the database. And as we know, this communication between the server and the database is being done with the help of something like an SQL query. SQL is just a programming language used to communicate with the database. Now, all of this is how a normal application should act. But this is all considered if our input does indeed get well filtered. But what if we, as attackers, instead of sending a regular input that the application expects, we send an SQL query? Well, that is when the problems can occur. And in this vulnerability, it can be a really big problem. If the input isn't filtered and our SQL query gets through, then what we can do is we can craft a query that could maybe tell the server to drop or to send us the entire database. If we were to do this successfully, we would have all the usernames, all the passwords, and all the private information of all the users registered on that specific website. As you can imagine, this can be really bad. An example of an SQL query that can be used to extract something from the database looks something like this. So it says select elements from table where condition. The things in the square brackets would get exchanged for elements and tables that are inside the database. So the real life command that a real website could potentially send to the database could look something like this. Select $sign from books where ID equals to 5. Now, this $sign is simply just a referrer that says select everything. Every time you see this $sign, it usually means everything. So select everything from the table called books where the ID is equal to 5. And ID could potentially be an ID for a product or a user or pretty much anything depending on the application. And this is just an example of a normal SQL query. In the practical lectures, we will see how we can manipulate user input and SQL language in order to get information from the database. See you in the next lecture.